Life feels impossible. Without Jesus, life is heavy. Life is unpredictable. Life can shake you, break you, and push you in directions you never planned to go. But the greatest fear in life doesn't come from storms, failures, or enemies. The greatest fear comes from walking through life alone, without a guide, without an anchor, without a savior. Because whether people admit it or not, the human soul was never designed to walk through this world by itself. You were designed to walk with God. You were designed to lean on someone stronger than you. And until you do, life will always feel frightening, unstable, and overwhelming. Life without Jesus is like standing on a boat in the middle of an ocean with no map, no compass, and no lighthouse. You don't know which direction to go. You don't know which waves you will face. You don't know when the storm will hit your boat. You don't know where the danger is coming from. That uncertainty, that emptiness, that fear, it eats you from the inside. People call it anxiety. People call it depression. People call it stress. But spiritually, it is the feeling of being disconnected from the one who created you. You were made in God's image. You were wired for His presence. That's why, no matter what you achieve, no matter how much you earn, no matter how many people know your name, there is still a deep space inside your soul that only Jesus can fill. When that space is empty, life becomes frightening. Not because God hates you, not because the world is too powerful, but because you are trying to do life with your limited strength, when you were created to live with His unlimited strength. People try many ways to fill this void. Some chase success. Some chase relationships. Some chase entertainment. Some chase money. Some run after fame. But no matter how fast you run or how much you collect, the emptiness remains. That's because fear is not defeated by accomplishments. Fear is defeated by presence, not your presence. His presence. Jesus is not just a religious idea. Jesus is not just a character from history. Jesus is not just a name people say in church. Jesus is the living God, the Prince of Peace. The light of the world, the one who calms storms with a word, the one who walks on water, the one who restores, redeems, and rescues. Fear cannot stand in His presence. Darkness cannot survive when His light enters your life. That is why life is scary without Him. Because without Him, you are walking in a world filled with spiritual darkness, and you have no light of your own. This world can take everything from you. Your job, your money, your friends, your health. But the world has no power to steal your peace when your peace comes from Jesus. The world can shake your circumstances, but it cannot shake your foundation when your foundation is the Rock of Ages. And when Jesus is not your foundation, every little problem becomes an earthquake. Every small disappointment becomes a crisis. Every trial feels like the end of the world. That is what happens when you try to build your life on your own strength. There is a reason Jesus said, "Without me you can do nothing." He wasn't trying to limit you. He was trying to free you from the burden of doing life alone. He was trying to tell you, you don't have to carry everything by yourself. Every fear you feel, every doubt you fight, every worry that keeps you awake at night, He wants to carry it with you. He wants to hold you, guide you, strengthen you, and lead you into a future filled with hope. Fear is the natural result of being disconnected from the God who gives life meaning. Fear grows when your problems feel bigger than your power. But when Jesus enters your life, your perspective changes. Suddenly, your mountains don't look impossible. Your valleys don't look hopeless. Your storms don't look deadly. Because now you are walking with someone who is greater than your past, stronger than your enemies, and wiser than your mistakes. Life without Jesus is scary because you see danger everywhere. But life with Jesus is powerful because you see answers everywhere. Without Him, you see closed doors. With Him, you see divine timing. Without Him, you see pain. With Him, you see purpose. Without Him, you see obstacles. With Him, you see opportunities. Without Him, you see fear. With Him, you see faith. There are moments in life when the weight becomes too heavy. and you feel like you're drowning. There are nights when you cry quietly because no one understands what you are carrying. There are days when the pressure becomes so overwhelming that you don't even know how to breathe. Those moments are not signs of weakness. Those moments are reminders that you need someone greater than yourself. Jesus is not just an option. He is the answer. He doesn't remove every storm, but He stands with you inside the storm. He doesn't stop every battle, but He fights it with you. He doesn't block every valley, but He walks beside you through it. This is why life changes when Jesus enters your story. Not because life becomes easy, but because you finally stop living it alone. The fear of the future disappears when you trust the one who holds the future. The fear of failure dies when you trust the one who never fails. The fear of loneliness fades when you trust the one who said, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." The fear of death loses its power when you trust the one who conquered the grave. Fear is real. Struggles are real. Pain is real. But Jesus is more real than all of them. If you are tired of living in fear, tired of pretending you are strong, tired of trying to survive on your own, tired of feeling empty, anxious, or lost, just know this: Jesus is not far. He is close. He is knocking at the door of your heart. He is waiting for you to say, "Lord, I can't do this alone anymore." When you open that door, everything changes, not instantly but deeply. Not magically, but powerfully. Jesus doesn't just enter your life, He transforms it. He doesn't just comfort you, He strengthens you. He doesn't just forgive you, He renews you. He doesn't just guide you, He walks with you. Life without Jesus is scary. But life with Jesus is unshakable. Life with Jesus is bold. Life with Jesus is peaceful. Life with Jesus is meaningful. Life with Jesus is victorious. And it all begins when you finally realize that the fear you feel is not a sign of defeat. It is a signal that you need Him. You were never meant to live without Jesus. Because with Him, you don't just survive life, you overcome it. The power of His presence, how Jesus turns fear into courage. If fear does not disappear because life becomes easier. Fear disappears when Jesus becomes nearer. His presence is not a feeling, not an emotion, not a Sunday experience. It is the supernatural strength that transforms a terrified heart into a courageous one. When Jesus steps into your life, He doesn't just bring comfort, He brings courage. He doesn't just calm your fears, He replaces them with faith. And that faith becomes a shield that no storm can break, no enemy can penetrate, and no failure can destroy. The presence of Jesus is not something you imagine. It is something you experience. You feel it when the peace of God settles in your heart in the middle of a crisis. You feel it when a problem that used to terrify you suddenly becomes small. You feel it when you walk through situations that should have crushed you. Yet somehow you come out stronger, calmer, wiser. That is the power of His presence. When Jesus is with you, you can face rejection, you can face sickness, you can face storms. You can face disappointment. You can face uncertainty. You can face the future. Because you know you are not walking into the unknown alone. He is walking with you. And when the King of Kings walks beside you, nothing in this world can intimidate you. Imagine a child walking through a dark forest alone. Every sound feels dangerous. Every shadow feels threatening. Every step feels terrifying. But if that child suddenly grabs the hand of their father, the fear disappears, not because the darkness is gone, but because of who is standing with them. That is what the presence of Jesus does. It doesn't remove all the darkness in the world, but it removes the fear within you. You don't overcome fear by pretending to be strong. You overcome fear by depending on the one who is strong. You don't defeat fear through positive thinking. You defeat fear through spiritual connection. You defeat fear when the presence of Jesus becomes your refuge, your foundation, your protection. There are moments when you feel overwhelmed by life, when everything around you is shaking, when people disappoint you, when plans collapse, when your strength runs out. In those moments, the presence of Jesus becomes your anchor. You may bend, but you won't break. You may fall, but you won't stay down. You may cry, but you won't collapse. Because His presence carries you when your own strength fails. The presence of Jesus is not just a comfort. It is a weapon. It is the weapon that protects your mind from anxiety, your heart from worry, your spirit from discouragement. When His presence surrounds you, fear loses its voice, worry loses its authority, panic loses its power, anxiety loses its grip. Because you begin to realize that the God who created the universe is the same God who is holding your life. Jesus does not simply walk beside you. He walks ahead of you. He prepares your way. He guides your steps. He removes the dangers you cannot see. He fights battles you don't even know are happening. He opens doors you didn't even know existed. You may feel small in the world, but Jesus is not small, and He is the one who stands with you. You may not always feel His presence emotionally, but His presence is still with you spiritually. Jesus is not limited by your feelings. Even when you feel weak, He is with you. Even when you feel lost, He is with you. Even when you make mistakes, He is with you. Even when you feel distant from God, He is closer than your next breath. His presence does not depend on your perfection. His presence depends on His promise. And His promise is unbreakable. There are people who try to replace God's presence with temporary solutions. They try alcohol, relationships, entertainment, money, distractions, yet none of it brings lasting peace. Because peace is not found in things. Peace is found in a person. And that person is Jesus. Jesus didn't say, "I will give you peace." He said, "I am your peace." His presence is peace. His presence is protection. His presence is stability. His presence is strength. When Jesus is with you, fear cannot dictate your decisions. Fear cannot control your destiny. Fear cannot hold you back. Because you stop living from your weakness and you start living from His power. Think about the disciples in the storm. The wind was strong, the waves were violent, the boat was shaking. They were professionals. They knew the sea. If THY were scared, the storm must have been deadly. But the moment Jesus stood up, everything changed. He didn't bring a bucket. He didn't bring ropes. He didn't bring tools. He simply brought His presence. And with one command, "Peace, be still," the storm obeyed Him. This is the power of His presence. He doesn't fight your storm. He commands it. He doesn't negotiate with fear. He silences it. He doesn't argue with darkness. He turns on the light. You can spend your whole life trying to deal with fear, or you can let Jesus remove it in one moment with His presence. His presence brings clarity when your mind is confused. His presence brings hope when your heart is heavy. His presence brings strength when your body feels weak. His presence brings direction when you feel lost. His presence brings courage when fear tries to paralyze you. The greatest privilege you have as a believer is not that you go to church. It is not that you read the Bible. It is not that you pray. Your greatest privilege is that Jesus lives with you, walks with you, and never leaves you. Every time fear tries to rise inside you, remind yourself, "I am not abandoned. I am not walking through this by myself. Jesus is with me. And if Jesus is with me, I have nothing to fear." A fear becomes powerless when Jesus becomes everything. Life is scary without Jesus, but life becomes victorious with Him. Not because you become fearless, but because you become filled with His courage. Jesus doesn't just change your situation, He changes wow. When His presence becomes your priority, fear becomes your past. When His presence becomes your shelter, fear becomes your shadow. When His presence becomes your identity, fear becomes your enemy. And when Jesus stands with you, nothing in this world can stand against you. There is a version of you that people see, and then there is a version of you that no one sees. On the outside, you smile, you work, you talk, you move forward, and you pretend everything is fine. But on the inside, you are fighting battles that no one knows about. Battles in your mind, battles in your heart, battles in your spirit. These are the battles that drain your strength, steal your peace, and increase your fear. And these battles become 10 times harder when you try to fight them without Jesus. People think fear comes from what happens around them, but fear comes from what happens inside them, inside their thoughts, inside their emotions, inside their spirit. You can be surrounded by blessings and still feel afraid. You can have money in the bank and still have no peace. You can have people around you and still feel empty. Because the real battle is not happening outside you. It is happening inside you. And without Jesus, that internal battle becomes exhausting. When Jesus is not the center of your life, fear begins to dominate your thoughts. You start imagining the worst. You start assuming danger where there is none. You start overthinking small things until they become mountains in your mind. The enemy knows that if he can control your thoughts, he can control your feelings. And if he can control your feelings, he can control your decisions. That's why so many people feel stuck. Not because their circumstances are impossible, but because their thoughts are unprotected. Jesus does not only save your soul, he protects your mind. The Bible calls him the Prince of Peace. Peace is not silence. Peace is protection. Peace is stability. Peace is clarity. And without his peace, your mind becomes a battlefield where fear, confusion, and anxiety attack you daily. When you walk without Jesus, you become vulnerable to voices. Voices of fear, voices of doubt, voices of insecurity, voices of failure. You start to believe lies like, "You're not enough. You can't handle this. You're going to fail. No one cares. No one understands. You don't have a future." These lies don't come from God. They don't even come from reality. They come from spiritual pressure, a pressure that gets heavier the further you walk from Jesus. Without Jesus, your heart becomes heavy, your mind becomes noisy, and your spirit becomes tired. Some people wake up every day wearing a mask. The world sees confidence, but God sees fear. The world sees success, but God sees pressure. The world sees strength, but God sees exhaustion. And the reason people hide is because they think no one would understand their inner struggle. But Jesus understands. Jesus sees the battles you don't talk about. Jesus hears the prayers you never say out loud. Jesus knows the pain behind your smile. And that is why life becomes so frightening without him. Because you are trying to carry weights that were never meant for your shoulders. When you walk without Jesus, you become your own provider, your own protector, your own guide. That means every problem becomes your responsibility. Every crisis becomes your burden. Every uncertainty becomes your fear. Your heart is not built to carry that much pressure. Only Jesus can handle it. It's like trying to lift a mountain with your bare hands. It's impossible. But when Jesus steps in, he carries what you cannot carry. He fights what you cannot fight. He sees what you cannot see. He strengthens you in ways you cannot explain. Walking without Jesus also means walking without spiritual protection. The enemy attacks you through fear, temptation, insecurity, and confusion. Without Jesus, you don't have the spiritual armor you need to defend yourself. That's why life feels overwhelming, because you are spiritually unprotected. But when Jesus is your shepherd, you are covered. When Jesus is your rock, you are stable. When Jesus is your foundation, you are unshakable. When Jesus is your leader, you are guided. His presence is protection. His word is a weapon. His love is a shield. His truth is a light that drives back darkness. People often ask, Jesus is so powerful. Why do I still struggle? The answer is simple. Jesus doesn't remove the battle. He removes the fear of the battle. Jesus doesn't always stop the storm. He teaches you how to stand in the storm. Jesus doesn't eliminate your enemies. He gives you the strength to overcome them. Jesus doesn't erase challenges. He equips you to rise above them. Walking with Jesus doesn't mean life gets easier. It means you get stronger. But walking without Jesus means everything gets heavier. Every disappointment feels like the end. Every rejection feels personal. Every mistake feels unforgivable. You lose the ability to see hope, possibility, or purpose. Without Jesus, you walk blind. With Jesus, you walk guided. Without Jesus, you walk afraid. With Jesus, you walk protected. Without Jesus, you walk confused. With Jesus, you walk enlightened. Without Jesus, you walk empty. With Jesus, you walk fulfilled. The hidden battles inside you are real. The fear is real. The pain is real. But Jesus is more real than all of it. The enemy wants you to think you are alone, but you're not. Jesus is always closer than you think. Life without Jesus is scary because you fight the wrong battles with the wrong weapons. But life with Jesus is powerful because you fight the right battles with His strength. When Jesus enters your life, the internal battles begin to shift. Fear begins to turn into faith. Confusion begins to turn into clarity. Anxiety begins to turn into peace. Discouragement begins to turn into hope. Weakness begins to turn into strength. You are not created to be afraid. You were created to be courageous. You are not created to live in confusion. You were created to walk in clarity. You were not created to feel empty. You were created to overflow with God's presence. You were not created to carry your own burdens. You were created to walk with Jesus. So if life feels scary, heavy, or overwhelming, it's not because you are weak. It's because you were never meant to fight alone. Jesus is the warrior, the protector, the defender of your soul. And when He stands with you, no hidden battle can defeat you. Life without Jesus is a battlefield. Life with Jesus is a victory story. Jesus makes you brave. How faith replaces fear. Fear is loud. Fear is aggressive. Fear is persistent. It whispers in your mind, attacks your confidence, steals your peace, and tries to convince you that disaster is always around the corner. Fear tells you that you're not capable, that you're not enough, that you're not strong enough to handle the storms ahead. But when Jesus enters your life, He does not just give you a little courage. He gives you a new identity. And that identity is bold, fearless, powerful, and victorious. When Jesus is in your heart, courage becomes your nature because His Spirit lives inside you. The courage that Jesus gives is not ordinary. It is not motivational, emotional, or temporary. It is spiritual courage, the kind that rises from a deep connection with the Creator of the universe. It is courage built not on your strength, but on His. It is courage that stays even when everything around you falls apart. Fear makes you run, but Jesus makes you rise. Fear makes you hide, but Jesus makes you stand. Fear makes you doubt, but Jesus makes you believe. Fear makes you shrink, but Jesus makes you grow. Fear limits you, but Jesus expands you. There are two kinds of courage in this world: human courage, which lasts until life hits you too hard. Heavenly courage, which lasts even in the middle of your hardest battles. Human courage says, I think I can. Heavenly courage says, I know God can. Human courage depends on your situation. Heavenly courage depends on Jesus' presence. Human courage collapses under pressure. Heavenly courage thrives under pressure. This is why people who walk with Jesus are able to face things that others would run away from, because their confidence does not come from the world. It comes from God. When you walk with Jesus, fear loses its authority over your life. Fear may knock on your door, but faith answers it. Fear may whisper lies, but truth silences them. Fear may show up, but it cannot stay. Because Jesus is not just the Savior of your soul, He is the strength of your spirit. Remember David? He faced Goliath, not because he was stronger, bigger, or more skilled, but because he was fearless. Why? Because the presence of God was with him. His courage did not come from his stones. His courage came from his faith. He wasn't looking at the size of the giant. He was looking at the size of his God. That same courage lives inside you when Jesus lives inside you. Faith begins where fear ends. Faith sees what fear cannot see. Fear sees the problem. Faith sees the promise. Fear sees the attack. Faith sees the victory. Fear sees the obstacle. Faith sees the breakthrough. Jesus does not remove fear from your life by making your problems disappear. He removes fear by making you stronger than the problems. He transforms your heart, your mindset, your spirit. He gives you the courage to walk through storms that used to scare you, the confidence to face situations that used to break you, and the boldness to stand firm when life tries to push you down. And here's the truth. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward even when fear tries to stop you. With Jesus, you don't become fearless, you become faithful. You become filled with His power, His Spirit, His confidence. Fear says, what if everything goes wrong? Faith says, what if everything goes right? Fear says, you are alone. Faith says, Jesus is with you. You're too weak. Faith says, God's strength is made perfect in your weakness. A fear says, impossible. Faith says, all things are possible with God. Once you start walking with Jesus, your mindset changes. You stop focusing on problems and start focusing on purpose. You stop noticing how big the storm is and start noticing how big your God is. You stop worrying about the future and start trusting God's timing. Jesus gives you courage that gets you out of bed on days when life feels heavy, helps you make decisions that fear tries to block, gives you the strength to let go of what is hurting you, helps you step into opportunities that feel intimidating, enables you to face the unknown with confidence, empowers you to believe when others doubt, teaches you to speak life when others speak fear, helps you stand your ground when the world shakes, allows you to trust when you cannot see the full picture. Life will always present moments that make you feel small, but Jesus will always remind you who you truly are: chosen, protected, empowered, and called. Courage begins when you stop listening to fear and start listening to Him. Fear tells you your story is over. Jesus tells you your story is just beginning. Fear points to your failures. Jesus points to your future. Fear reminds you of your weaknesses. Jesus reminds you of His strength. Fear makes you look at yourself. Faith makes you look at Him. When Jesus becomes your foundation, you no longer shake when life shakes. You may have moments of doubt, but doubt cannot live where faith is growing. You may have moments of fear, but fear cannot survive in a heart that trusts Jesus deeply. The same Jesus who calmed the storm can calm your anxiety. The same Jesus who healed the sick can heal your broken heart. The same Jesus who raised the dead can resurrect your hope. The same Jesus who opened blind eyes can open new doors in your life. Courage is not something you build. Courage is something God puts inside you. You become brave not because you are strong, but because Jesus is with you. His presence does not just comfort you. It transforms you. It turns you into a warrior, not a worrier. It turns your fear into faith and your panic into peace. Life without Jesus is full of fear. Life with Jesus is full of courage. Because He doesn't just walk ahead of you. He walks inside you.